Good evening. Thanks very much for joining us on What's Hot. I'm Shireen Bhan, the top 5. Well, let me start by thanking all our viewers for your continued support. CNBC TV18 has emerged as the most watched television news channel on Budget Day. We are India's #1 choice with almost 60% viewership on Budget Day. Not just that, CNBC TV18 beat competition in the budget week as well with a 60% viewership. And when the finance minister spoke with me post-budget, we had more than a 98% viewership, breaking all records. CNBC TV18 has been your budget destination for 19 years. We've brought you the biggest voices on the market, economy and top policy makers here on this one platform. We are also today the most watched English news channel. We at CNBC TV18 get you the real picture with the biggest and the best, and we want to thank our viewers for your trust and your continued support. Well, let's start with the market action of the day. Strong global cues helping the bulls make a comeback on Dalal Street. The Nifty snapped its 4-day losing streak to end over 0.5% higher. Both the Nifty and the Sensex posted their best one-day gain in the last 8 trading sessions. So perhaps there is some overselling for our markets. Broader markets rose in line with the benchmarks as the Nifty Bank snapped its 3-day losing streak. So the bulls are getting a bit of a relief, but the sentiment is far from upbeat. Auto sales are in the slow lane, consumer goods are struggling for traction, and this does not bode well for a potential economic recovery. Two big newsmakers today were candid about the current situation, even as they remain hopeful that a recovery could be around the corner. Pawan Goenka of M&M said April to June was the worst for passenger vehicles in nearly 2 decades. Axis Bank's Amitabh Chaudhry also said that a slowdown in auto and consumption is dragging the economy. But let's start with Pawan Goenka. After a 15% contraction in growth in Q1, Goenka said Mahindra & Mahindra could slash its full-year growth projection, but he does remain hopeful that the upcoming festive season could provide a much-needed boost to consumption, a sentiment that was also echoed by the president of industry body SIAM, Rajan Vadera. Take a look.
This is perhaps the worst quarter for passenger vehicles since 2001. That means in 18 years we haven't had this kind of drop. And the closest that we came was, I think, third quarter of F09, just before the slowdown that happened. And then we did recover very quickly. And that's kind of what I'm counting on, that if we do all the right things, India has the resilience, the industry has the resilience to recover very quickly from a very sharp drop that has happened. And we have proven it 2-3 times in the history. It's a vicious cycle that we have fallen in, and we need to create a virtuous cycle by giving a bit of a kick for demand for a short term. And therefore something has to be done. And I guess one of the disappointments that the industry had was that while the budget was very good for electric vehicles, while the budget was very good for long-term vision for the government, but for the short-term stimuli that we needed for the next 3 months, 4 months, till the festive season is over, was missing. Last month we had, I think, 4 to 5 days of shutdown, which means on a 25 days working, we are about 20% shutdown. Yeah, that's right, 20% shutdown on a 25-day working. And the month of July is looking better. I don't know right now whether we will have a shutdown or not, but even if we did, it will not be 5 or 6 days. It will be somewhat lower.
July typically is is not a very good month because of the monsoons and slowing down of various activities. July is till today not looking any better than June. So we are hopeful that September, due to festive season, should bounce back. With the inventory now under control, and hopefully the month of July also will lead to balancing of the inventories, I think the situation is only going to improve from here as far as the dealers are concerned.
Well, that's the auto sector where the slowdown continues. And it's not just auto companies. Banks are equally worried about the slowdown in consumption. Axis Bank's Amitabh Chaudhry is cautious about the bank's growth outlook and the sectors that they will lend money to. Chaudhry said some industries are showing signs of stress. And even though Axis Bank has shareholder approval to raise capital, he said that they will only make a move when they believe the time is right. Take a look.
We'll talk about the growth when we have the opportunity to talk about it. But yes, I think I'll only say that we have to be cautious about how do we look at growth going forward.
So, but when you're being conservative about growth and talking about a slowdown, what is the need to raise capital? I mean, how much lending are you going to be?
We have not said we are raising capital. The only thing we have said is that we are taking an enabling resolution to look at raising capital when the right opportunity arises. As far as the budget is concerned, I think it has given some clear signals in terms of what the government expects to see on the NBFC side. We are hoping that it can lead to some of the demand coming back. I think the finance minister has very clearly painted a vision and has backed that vision with some measures. Some measures will be rolled out over a period of time.
So my last question on the Essar Steel verdict, are you a little upset about what has come out? Lenders are obviously going to challenge this, but what sort of precedent does it set, and are you going to be a little hesitant using IBC going forward?
Well, I mean, obviously the banks are talking about going to the Supreme Court and requesting them to relook at the judgment. It was a bit unexpected. So let's wait for the Supreme Court judgment before we start jumping to conclusions on whether IBC makes sense or does not make sense.
Well, that's Axis Bank's Amitabh Chaudhary on the consumption slowdown, its impact on lending, and of course the NCLAT order on Essar Steel. But on to a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. Cash-strapped Dewan Housing Finance had a stakeholders meeting today to discuss the resolution plan for the mortgage lender. CNBC TV 18 learns that banks have granted DHFL 7 days to present a proposal. Ritu Singh joins us now with the details on what transpired. Ritu, what are you picking up? What transpired at that meeting today?
Mr. Kalani, thank you so much for speaking to CNBC TV 18. Congratulations on this order. Now, about 2 years ago, you set up this facility in Hyderabad with an investment of about $5 million. That was meant to be for the Spike missiles. That order has not fructified. Is this the redemption of CRAS in your eyes?
See, that's the beauty of this business. If you focus on a product and you create a facility to assemble a product, and if you don't get that order, then you can't do anything else. If you focus on a process and creating process-related technologies, then if you don't get that order, you can do many other things. And that's exactly what we are doing. And that is our strength. That you create the capability to understand the process, the technology, and with that you can make many other products.
From a point of view of a defense contractor, however, what is your view on the progress that the government has made on these big ticket announcements? We mentioned Spike. There's the FICV project also, where we've not heard an update for some time, and the general consensus is that the government takes a lot of time for bigger orders while smaller orders keep coming in. Would you agree with this, and what do you think the government can do to better that?
Yes, a lot of time has elapsed for any big contracts to come in, but that's the way the defense systems work all over the world. It's not nothing special about it in India. Okay, I think everybody was on a euphoria that suddenly some big orders are going to fall in everybody's laps. It never happens that way. I think you need to create capabilities, you need to create facilities, you need to create products, they need to get tested, the user has to test it. This cycle is a long cycle, it's not a short cycle.
All right, that's Baba Kalyani there talking about their plans for the defense business, and because there has been a significant lag in defense procurement orders coming their way, they want to focus more on their bread and butter business, which is auto. But we were actually going to be addressing the story that we wanted to talk about, which is DHFL, and there was a meeting today with the lenders. Let's go across to Ritu now. She joins us with more details. So Ritu, another meeting now, a week later. Lenders have given DHFL a week's time to put together a final plan.
The key stakeholders of DHFL, including the core group of lenders, its bondholders, that is mutual funds and provident funds that have exposure to DHFL, SBI Caps, which is acting as the advisor to lenders, as well as the promoter Kapil Vadhavan, held a meeting to discuss the resolution roadmap for the company, which, remember, has total borrowings of over 1 lakh crore rupees. Now, we understand that banks have allowed DHFL 7 working days' time to present its resolution proposal to them, and they have also asked the DHFL promoters to pledge their shares as collateral if banks do agree to give them any fresh loans and sign an NDU or a non-disposal undertaking in favor of the lenders until this resolution plan is executed. Now, in the stakeholders meeting, the broad contours of the draft resolution proposal were discussed, including restructuring of loans with longer repayment terms, partial debt conversion and additional support by way of a new line of credit. Now, we understand that these mutual funds and pension funds have sought an assurance from the bankers that the final resolution plan would be collaborative and not lead to losses for them. Now, banks, we understand, on their behalf have assured them that the resolution plan would be comprehensive and will maximize value for all the stakeholders that are involved. Now, do remember, DHFL, we had reported, is understood to be in talks with various private equity players, including Aeon Capital, Cerberus Capital, as well as Oaktree, for a potential stake sale deal, which could fetch DHFL upwards of 7,000 crore rupees.
All right, Ritu, thanks very much. So 7 days more to DHFL to come up with a resolution plan. Of course, lenders will have to sign off on it. Now, India's long-term consumption story is still intact. That's the word in from Singapore-based Temasek, which has invested over $11 billion into India. The India head, Ravi Lamba, is hot on consumption stocks despite the current slowdown. Speaking to Nisha Poddar, he listed out sectors where Temasek could potentially ramp up its investments. Take a look.
Globally, we sold more than we bought last year because of the point I made earlier, where we were moderating our pace of investments. In India, we are at a record high now. We are at $11 billion of exposure in India. We are at 5% of the total portfolio of Temasek, which is also a record high. And you know, we have been investing over $1 billion a year for the last 5 years, 6 years now. And so net, we grew in India last year. We were 4% last year. We were about $10 billion. This year, we are 11 and 5%.
Right. From the union budget also, Ravi, what is the kind of sense that you get from the new government, which is in continuation to the last 5 years? Does that give you a little more certainty about investments in India? And are there any thoughts post the budget as well?
I think we saw the budget as a long-term budget. We have seen reforms put into place by this government in the first term. Key reforms being, as we talked about before, on the bankruptcy code, as well as on GST, and we expect that execution to continue. And we would expect them to continue to have more reforms come into place. And so we see this budget as a prudent budget. There may have been disappointment in the markets, as people may not have seen it that way, but I think on a long-term basis we find it positive. We believe that there are a lot of good tailwinds in India, and as long as we see as long as we see policy certainty going forward and clarity, we think it will improve the ease of doing business in the country. And therefore all of those to us play out well as we think about increasing our exposure to the country.
Well, that's Temasek on their India plans, but a stock that continues to reel under pressure, Indigo. It closed more than 3% lower after news of that spat between its promoters broke out on Tuesday. We are now given to understand that market regulator SEBI has called Indigo's company secretary for a meeting and sought a response on the ongoing spat between Rakesh Gangwal and Rahul Bhatia. Remember, SEBI had already asked them to respond by the 19th of July, but this is now a meeting that they have sought with the company secretary. Meanwhile, reports suggest that Indigo's shareholders' pact could be checked by the government. This is not something that CNBC TV 18 has been able to independently verify. Also, the agreement between Rakesh Gangwal and Rahul Bhatia could be annulled if found in being violation of the Companies Act. Again, not independently verified by CNBC TV 18. Remember, the stock saw delivery-based selling of 400 crore rupees yesterday, so the pressure continues for Indigo. Well, staying with aviation, and this one is an exclusive. India's aviation regulator, the DGCA, believes that Boeing will take more time to fix the problems with its 737 MAX aircraft. Remember, these planes were grounded in March by regulators around the world after 2 crashes claimed over 300 lives. However, the DGCA sources tell us that the regulator is monitoring the situation closely and is even likely to visit the US on this matter. Remember, SpiceJet has 12 MAX planes in its fleet and has placed an order for 205 more such aircraft. So this is going to be a cause of concern for SpiceJet. But here's the latest on the Indo-US trade ties. A delegation of US trade negotiators is in India to discuss and resolve the tariff tussle between the two countries. The visit comes in the backdrop of the US President Donald Trump's latest tariff warning to India. Earlier this week, President Trump had tweeted that India's tariff on American goods were no more acceptable to the US government. Parikshit Luthra is tracking that, joins us now with more. So Parikshit, what are the expectations from these talks?
Well, it seems that India would definitely like to keep expectations low on this one because trade dispute is something which has been a very important issue for the United States president. And the view coming from our sources in the government, and especially diplomatic sources, is that one should not be too hung up, and we should not be too hung up with the trade issues and look at them in a very narrow perspective, because we need to be guided by the larger strategic importance of the Indo-US relationship, and therefore if we need to give them some trade concessions, those should be done so that we get larger strategic concessions in future, and maybe concessions on the 5G relationship as well. So having said that, it seems that you have officials from the Ministry of External Affairs, Commerce Ministry, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology who are there for that meeting. You've got the Assistant US Trade Representative, the Deputy Assistant US Trade Representative, who will be having brainstorming sessions for 2 days. Those meetings are still going on. Predominantly, the tariff issue, the e-commerce issue, the data localization issue would be discussed. My sources are telling me that 5G is not on the table, but yes, it could come up for discussion in some way or the other. You can expect this meeting to set the tone for a meeting between Robert Lighthizer, the US Trade Representative, and Piyush Goyal, the Indian Commerce Minister, in the days to come.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks for joining us.
Speaker Ramesh Kumar has sought more time to decide on the resignation of the Rebel Congress and Janata Dal secular legislators. Today, 10 Rebel lawmakers walked to the Speaker's chamber in the Vidhan Sabha under heavy police protection and submitted their resignations. The resignations, if accepted, will leave the Kumaraswamy government in a minority. Remember, earlier in the day, the Supreme Court had asked the 10 Rebel MLAs to meet the Speaker at 6 p.m. today and submit their resignations. The court further directed that the Speaker can't sit on the resignations. Mugdha Warrior, who has been tracking this very closely, is here with the latest. Mugdha, over to you.
Yes, today's Nataka in this Karnataka political crisis ended with the Speaker meeting the 10 rebel MLAs who had flown down from Mumbai to Bangalore today on the directions of the Supreme Court. Remember, these MLAs had moved the Supreme Court after the Speaker had said that, 8 of the resignations were not in the proper format and hence had not accepted them. Today, the Speaker said, he addressed the media and he said that all the resignations received were in the proper format, but he is yet to take a decision on accepting these resignations. He says he doesn't want to hurry or rush any kind of decision. He says he will examine these resignations through the night to verify if they are voluntary and genuine. He said that he will also hold personal hearings with all of the rebel MLAs to hear their arguments, and only if he's satisfied will he go ahead with accepting these resignations. The Speaker also said that given that the rebel MLAs had raised issues of security and the Supreme Court had asked that security be ensured, he said that they have videographed all the proceedings that happened today and he will send this to the Supreme Court. So really, the Speaker did not make any clear, announcements on what his next steps will be. Of course, tomorrow the Assembly session kicks off and we have to watch how that unfolds. The Congress has issued a whip to all its MLAs to attend this Assembly session, but it is still to be seen whether the 10 rebel MLAs will attend the session tomorrow. In fact, as we understand, they may be flying back to Mumbai. So really, tomorrow is another day in this whole political, drama that's happening here in Karnataka.
The honourable members approach me, which is the day they have gone to Governor?
Same day, 6th.
6th they come to my office. They don't communicate to me. They rush to Governor. But what can the Governor do? His Excellency received these things and sent back to me. Please try to decide them at the earliest. Is it just not misusing a very noble constitutional functionary? Governor is a representative of the Republic on behalf of the President of India. Should we make use of his secretariat for these silly reasons? As per the rules of procedure and conduct of business of Karnataka Legislative Assembly, Rule 202 specifies that the intended resignation should be in perfect format. Unfortunately, 8 of the 13 letters that had reached my office were not in the format. I have communicated to them on 9th itself that if they so intend to resign, they should resubmit their resignation letters in the prescribed format. The remaining 5 people whose resignation letters were in the format, I have given them time, giving a 2 days time from 12th onwards. 13th and 14th happen to be holidays. I have called 3 of them on 12th, the remaining people on 15th.
Meanwhile, the Central Bureau of Investigation has conducted raids at the homes and offices of lawyer Indira Jaising, Anand Grover and their NGO Lawyers Collective. Earlier this year, remember, the CBI had registered a case against Anand Grover and Lawyers Collective for alleged FCRA violations. However, the Lawyers Collective had alleged that the CBI probe was a move to silence the organisation. Ashwin Kumar is here with the details. Ashwin, what's the latest?
Well, as you correctly pointed out, the CBI today conducted raids across Delhi and as well as Mumbai, conducting raids at the offices and residences of senior advocates Indira Jaising as well as senior advocate Anand Grover. Now, what we understand is that both these lawyer senior advocates are in fact the founding members of an NGO called the Lawyers Collective, which is very active in the PIL space concerning human rights, secularism, independence of the judiciary, very active in that space. Now, as of today's concern, the raids, the CBI has pointed out that they filed an FIR back in the month of June and that this is in pursuance of that FIR. Their charge essentially, their initial premise essentially is that between the years 2006 and 14, this NGO received a large amount of foreign contribution to the tune of about 32 crore rupees and that this money was then misused by the office bearers of Lawyers Collective, the NGO in question. Now, that's of course the position that the CBI appears to have taken as of right now. However, roll back time to June of this year when the FIR had been filed. At that point, Lawyers Collective had issued a statement where they said that this is nothing but an attempt to silence them. They pointed out that they've been very active in the space of litigation against BJP leadership, against the government, against Amit Shah himself, that they've been very active in cases such as politically sensitive cases, such as the Bhima Koregaon case, such as the case against the former West Bengal Chief Minister. They've also been very active, in fact, in pointing out anomalies and lapses in the manner in which the case of sexual harassment against the CJI had been followed. And all of this, they say, gives them reason to believe that this is an attempt to, in fact, hit back at them. This is nothing but retribution. That was a statement that they had issued way back then. But clearly, as of right now, the CBI admitting that they appear to have collected incriminating documents. And for now, what we understand, after speaking from sources within Lawyers Collective, they tell us that they will be taking recourse to all the legal remedies that are available to them. Back to you.
Okay, so that's of course a case that we're going to be tracking very closely. But with that, we'll have to wrap up this edition of What's Hot. Thank you for watching. Up next, we shift focus to the markets. Strong global cues help the bulls make a comeback on Dalal Street market today. Talkback takes all the action forward. I will see you in 30 minutes on India Business Hour. Stay tuned.